My name is Marcia Rivera. I'm 43 years old. And until 3 months ago, nobody in this gleaming corporate tower knew I existed. I was just another shadow mopping floors after midnight, emptying trash cans filled with the remnants of important decisions I'd never be part of making. But today, everything changed in ways I never imagined possible. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as I pushed my cart down the executive hallway, the wheels squeaking against the polished marble that reflected my weathered face. Back at me. 22 years I've been cleaning these offices, watching through glass doors as men in expensive suits moved millions with the stroke of a pen, while I scrubbed the coffee stains they left behind. People think janitors are invisible, and maybe that's true. We blend into the background like furniture, present but unnoticed. We hear conversations that could topple governments, witness affairs that destroy families, and absorb secrets that could shake entire industries. But we're just the help, so who would believe us anyway? I learned long ago to keep my head down and my mouth shut. The pay was decent enough to support my daughter Sophia's college tuition and keep food on our table. My husband Carlos often asked why I never applied for better positions. I'd always give him the same answer: this job gives us stability. What I never told him was that I was afraid that if people really saw me, they'd discover what I've been hiding all these years. Tonight felt different, though. The air seemed charged with an electricity that made my skin prickle as I cleaned Mr. Harrison's corner office. James Harrison, CEO of Meridian Industries, was still working, late, hunched over documents that probably contained more zeros than I'd see in a lifetime. His silver hair caught the lamplight as he muttered to himself in frustration. I was emptying his wastebasket when I heard him curse loudly, throwing his reading glasses onto the mahogany desk with such force that they skittered across the surface. "Damn it," he shouted, to no one in particular. 3 weeks and nobody can make heads or tails of this contract. We're about to lose the biggest deal in company history because of a language barrier. My hands froze on the plastic liner of his trash can. Through the thin walls, I could hear other executives in the conference room next door, their voices rising in heated discussion about the same problem that had been plaguing the company for weeks. The Yamazaki Corporation deal, worth $300 million, was slipping through their fingers because nobody could properly translate the technical specifications in the contract addendum. "Sir," I heard someone say as footsteps approached Harrison's office. The translation service called again. "They say the document contains specialized engineering terminology that doesn't exist in standard dictionaries. They need at least another month to research the proper equivalents." Harrison's fist slammed against his desk, rattling the crystal paperweight his wife had given him for their anniversary. I dusted that paperweight countless times, had even carefully repositioned it when Harrison knocked it over during particularly stressful phone calls. Strange how intimate you become with someone's life when you clean up after them for 2 decades. A month. Harrison's voice cracked with desperation. "The board meeting is tomorrow morning. If I walk into that room without a signed contract, they'll have my head. 28 years I've been building this company, and it's all going to crumble because of words on a page that might as well be hieroglyphics." I should have continued with my work, should have faded back into invisibility like I always did. But something about the raw vulnerability in his voice made me pause. Alice wasn't the confident CEO who barked orders and commanded respect. This was a man watching his life's work slip away. And despite everything, I felt sorry for him. The footsteps retreated, leaving Harrison alone with his despair. I watched him through the glass partition as he loosened his tie and buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook slightly, and I realized with shock that James Harrison was crying. The untouchable master of the corporate universe was falling apart. And nobody was there to witness it except the invisible janitor. What happened next changed everything. As I stood there, frozen between duty and compassion, something stirred. Deep within me, a memory of my grandmother's voice from decades past. She used to tell me stories in her native Japanese tales of honor and courage that she'd learned from her own mother before the war separated their family forever. You see, what Mr. Harrison didn't know, what nobody in this building knew, was that I understood every word of those hieroglyphic documents scattered across his desk. The technical specifications, the engineering terminology, the cultural nuances that were causing his translators such grief was all as clear to me as the English words I'd been keeping to myself for over 2 decades. My grandmother had insisted I learn the language properly, not just the scattered phrases most third-generation immigrants retained. Language is power, Marcia, she used to say in her accented English. But sometimes power must wait for the right moment to reveal itself. She'd been an engineer herself in Japan before the war. Before she became just another immigrant cleaning houses in California, I watched Harrison's shoulders shake with silent sobs. This powerful man reduced to desperation over words I could translate in my sleep. The irony wasn't lost on me here. I was invisible in my janitorial uniform, holding the key to his salvation in my weathered hands. The same hands that emptied his trash and polished his desk now trembled with the weight of possibility. Mr. Harrison. The words escaped my lips before I could stop them, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, startled, his red-rimmed eyes focusing on me as if seeing me for the first time. For a moment, neither of us moved. I was just the cleaning lady who dared to speak, and he was the CEO caught in his most vulnerable moment. "I'm sorry," I started to say, already backing toward my cart. "I didn't mean to wait." His voice stopped me cold. Something in his tone had shifted, a desperate hope creeping into his words. "What did you want to say?" This was it. The moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for my entire life. 22 years of invisibility, of keeping my head down, of letting others assume I was just another uneducated cleaning woman. But my grandmother's blood ran through my veins, and her wisdom whispered in my ear. I straightened my shoulders, met his gaze directly, and in perfect formal Japanese, I read aloud the first paragraph of the technical specification that lay open on his desk. Asterisk. The silence that followed my words was deafening. Harrison's mouth fell open, his eyes widening as he stared at me as if I'd just materialized from thin air. The transformation in his expression was something I'd never forget. Shock, melting, into disbelief, then into something that looked almost like reverence. You can read this," he whispered, gesturing toward the documents with a shaking hand. "Yes, sir," I replied in English, my voice steadier now. "Can read it, translate it, and explain the cultural context that your other translators are missing. This isn't just engineering terminology, it's a matter of understanding the relationship between formal business protocol and technical precision in Japanese corporate culture." Harrison slowly stood up, never taking his eyes off me. "How long have you, 22 years I've been cleaning your offices, Mr. Harrison, and for 22 years I've been listening to you struggle with international deals, watching opportunities slip away because of miscommunication. But I've also been watching you treat people like me as if we don't exist." The words came out sharper than I'd intended, years of suppressed frustration bleeding through my professional composure. But I wasn't done. My grandmother was Akiko Tanaka. She was a structural engineer in Kyoto before the war. She taught me that intelligence doesn't come with a title, and wisdom doesn't require a corner office. She also taught me patience to wait for the moment when knowledge becomes most valuable. Harrison sank back into his chair, the weight of realization hitting him full force. "Mrs. Rivera, Marcia. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything right now," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "What you need is this contract translated correctly with all the cultural nuances intact by tomorrow morning." And despite everything, despite being invisible, for 2 decades offering to help you, I moved closer to his desk, my cleaning cart forgotten in the doorway. But I have conditions. For the first time in our 22-year acquaintance, James Harrison looked at me not as the janitor, but as an equal. The power dynamic in that room had shifted so completely that neither of us would ever be the same again. "What do you need?" he asked, and I could hear the genuine respect in his voice. I smiled, feeling my grandmother's spirit strong within me. "First, we're going to have a very different conversation about my position in this company. And second, you're going to learn that the most valuable assets often come in the most unexpected packages." As I rolled up my sleeves and approached the documents that had stumped his entire legal team, I realized that after decades of being unseen, I was finally ready to step into the light. The invisible janitor was about to become the most important person in the room, and tomorrow, when James Harrison walked into that boardroom with a perfectly translated contract, he would carry with him not just a business deal worth $300 million, but a lesson about the human dignity that exists in every person we encounter. No matter what uniform they wear, the next 6 hours passed like a dream I was afraid to wake from. Harrison called his assistant and told her to cancel all morning meetings, then ordered coffee and sandwiches from the executive dining room, not for himself, but for me. It was the first time in 22 years that, I'd sat at his conference table instead of cleaning around it as I worked through the documents. Translating not just words, but cultural concepts, Harrison watched with the fascination of someone discovering a hidden world. I explained how the Yamazaki Corporation's seemingly rigid technical specifications actually contain subtle invitations for collaborative problem-solving, something Western negotiators routinely missed. "Here," I said, pointing to a clause that had completely baffled his legal team. "They're not demanding exact compliance with these measurements." In Japanese business culture, this phrasing is actually expressing confidence in your company's engineering expertise to find elegant solutions within these parameters. It's a compliment disguised as a requirement. Harrison leaned forward, his exhaustion forgotten. "So when our engineers responded with exact specifications, you inadvertently insulted them by implying they didn't trust your judgment," I finished. "But it's fixable. We just need to rephrase our response to acknowledge their confidence while demonstrating our innovative approach." By dawn, we had not only translated the entire contract, but restructured Meridian's response to align with Japanese business protocols. What had seemed like an impossible deadline became an opportunity for cultural bridge building. "Marcia," Harrison said as he reviewed the final draft, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Why are you helping me? After 22 years of being not seeing you, why?" I set down my pen and looked out the window at the sunrise, painting the city golden. "'Cause, Mr. Harrison, my grandmother taught me that intelligence without compassion is worthless, and knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. You're not a bad man, you're just a man who lived so long in your world that you forgot other worlds existed." I stood up and smoothed my uniform. "Besides, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about proving that potential exists everywhere, in every person who walks through these halls. Maybe the next time you see someone in a custodial uniform, you'll remember this night." The board meeting was at 9 a.m. I watched from the executive floor as Harrison walked into the conference room, a translated contract in his briefcase and a new understanding in his eyes. Through the glass walls, I could see the other board members' faces transform from skepticism to amazement as he presented not just a translated document, but a comprehensive cultural analysis that would revolutionize how Meridian approached international partnerships. The Yamazaki deal was approved unanimously, but the real transformation came later that afternoon when Harrison called me into his office not as a janitor, but as a consultant. The conversation we'd promised to have about my position in the company lasted 3 hours and resulted in the creation of a new role, Director of International Cultural Relations. "I can't undo 22 years of being blind," Harrison told me as he offered me the position. but I can make sure the next 22 years are different. I thought of my grandmother, of her dreams deferred but not destroyed, passed down through generations until they found their moment. I'll need to finish my shift first, I told him with a smile. I never leave a job half done. That evening, as I completed my final rounds as night janitor, I wasn't invisible anymore. Word had somehow spread through the building about the cleaning lady who saved the company, and people executives, secretaries. Security guards actually saw me, spoke to me, acknowledged me. It felt strange and wonderful and long overdue. 3 months later, I stood in that same executive hallway, no longer pushing a cart, but carrying a briefing case of my own. The Yamazaki partnership had exceeded all expectations, leading to 3 more major international deals that I'd helped negotiate. My office overlooked the same marble floors I'd once mopped. But now I saw them from an entirely different perspective. Sophia called me at work that day, her voice bubbling with pride. "Mom, I can't believe it. My friends are saying their parents read about you in the business journal. You're famous." "Not famous, Mia." I corrected her gently. "It's just finally visible." The hardest part hadn't been learning to navigate boardrooms or international conference calls. It had been learning to see myself as others now saw me, not as the invisible janitor, but as Marcia Rivera, cultural strategist, bridge builder. The granddaughter of an engineer who had never forgotten her roots, Harrison and I developed an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect and shared understanding. He often told people that the most important business lesson he'd ever learned came not from Harvard Business School, but from a conversation with his night janitor. He instituted a company-wide program ensuring that every employee, regardless of position, had opportunities for growth and recognition. But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. Carlos no longer asked why I didn't apply for better positions. Instead, he marveled at how I'd created one for myself. And when Sophia graduated summa cum laude with her engineering degree, she told me that her inspiration wasn't just my success, but my patience, the way I'd waited 22 years for exactly the right moment to step into the light. Asterisk. 2 years had passed since that transformative night, and Meridian Industries had become a very different company. My international cultural relations department now employed 12 people, each one a former invisible employee who had hidden talents waiting to be discovered. There was Miguel from maintenance, who spoke 4 languages and now headed our Latin American division. Sarah from the cafeteria, whose accounting degree had been gathering dust until I convinced Harrison to let her audit our overseas expenditures. She'd already saved the company $2 million. But success brings its own challenges. The business world had taken notice of Meridian's unconventional approach to human resources, and I found myself invited to speak at conferences, featured in magazines, and courted by headhunters offering positions at larger corporations. The attention was flattering, but it also brought scrutiny I wasn't entirely comfortable with. Mrs. Rivera, the journalist from Forbes, had asked during our interview last week, "Some critics say that your story is too good to be true. They suggest it's a carefully crafted publicity stunt. How do you respond to those allegations?" I'd looked at her calmly, my grandmother's wisdom flowing through me. "I respond by continuing to do the work. Truth doesn't need defense, it needs demonstration." That evening, as I reviewed quarterly reports in my office, Harrison knocked on my door. His hair was grayer now, but his eyes held a warmth that hadn't been there during our janitor's CEO days. "Marcia, we need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "The board has received an interesting proposal. Sakamoto Industries wants to buy us out," Harrison continued, watching my reaction carefully. "Full acquisition. $1.2 billion. They specifically mentioned you in their proposal. They want to expand our international division across their entire global network." I set down my pen, processing this information. Sakamoto Industries was one of Japan's largest conglomerates, a company whose influence stretched across continents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same cultural expertise that had once made me invisible was now making me invaluable. "What do you think?" I asked. Harrison leaned back, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I think it's your decision as much as mine. They're not just buying Meridian, they're buying the vision we've built together. The question is, are you ready to take this global?" I thought about Anna, the security guard who was now our junior systems analyst. About the dozens of employees who had found their voices because someone finally listened. About my grandmother's dreams, which had traveled across an ocean and through generations to find their fulfillment in the most unexpected way. "I have conditions," I said, echoing the words I'd spoken to him 2 years earlier. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Harrison laughed. "What do you need? Every employee gets to keep their position if they want it. Our cultural inclusion program becomes standard across all Sakamoto properties worldwide. And I want to establish a foundation, the Akiko Tanaka Foundation, to fund education and opportunity programs for overlooked workers globally." Harrison nodded slowly. "Anything else?" "Yes, I want you to stay on as president of North American operations. This company changed because we changed together. I'm not ready to do this alone." The acquisition took 6 months to finalize, during which time I found myself traveling to Tokyo, São Paulo, London, and Sydney, meeting with executives who treated me with the respect that my expertise commanded. In each city, I made sure to spend time with the cleaning crews, the security guards, the cafeteria workers, the invisible people who kept these gleaming towers functioning in Tokyo. I met Hiroshi, a night custodian who had a PhD in chemistry, but couldn't find work in his field due to age discrimination. In London, there was Priya, facilities coordinator who had designed innovative energy-saving systems that could revolutionize building management. In São Paulo, I discovered Carlos ironically sharing my husband's name, who had been quietly developing a more efficient recycling process in his off hours. Each discovery reinforced my belief that talent and intelligence weren't distributed based on job titles or educational credentials. They were everywhere, waiting to be recognized. The day we signed the final acquisition papers, I stood in the same hallway where I'd once pushed a cleaning cart, now surrounded by international media, capturing what they called the most unconventional business success story of the decade. But I wasn't looking at the cameras. I was looking at Anna, who was now heading up our technology integration team, and at Miguel, who was explaining our cultural sensitivity training to a group of Sakamoto executives in flawless Portuguese. Mrs. Rivera, a reporter, called out, "What would you say to other companies about finding hidden talent in their workforce?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling my grandmother's presence beside me. I'd say stop looking for talent and start seeing people. The most valuable resources in any organization aren't hidden, they're just ignored. Asterisk, the Akiko Tanaka Foundation, launched 6 months later with an endowment of $50 million, funded jointly by the acquisition proceeds and matching contributions from Sakamoto Industries. Our first initiative was simple: identify and support overlooked employees in corporations worldwide who showed potential for advancement, but lacked opportunity. Our pilot program started with 50 companies across 20 countries. The results exceeded even my optimistic projections. Within the first year, we'd identified over 300 employees whose hidden skills ranged from engineering and finance to linguistics and technology. More importantly, we'd convinced their employers to invest in their development. There was Maria Santos in Mexico City, cleaning lady who had been designing more efficient workflow systems in her head for years. When we connected her with management, she revolutionized their entire operations process. In Mumbai, we found David Chen, a security guard whose insights into building access patterns helped prevent 3 potential security breaches. But the foundation's impact went beyond individual success stories. We were changing corporate culture itself, forcing companies to question their assumptions about human potential and the value of every employee. The foundation's headquarters occupied 2 floors of the former Meridian building, now renamed the Meridian Sakamoto International Center. I kept my original office, but I'd added something new, a window display showing photographs of every person we'd helped, along with their stories. Visitors often spent more time studying these pictures than they did in our conference rooms. You know, Harrison told me one afternoon as we reviewed our expansion plans. I've been thinking about that night 2 years ago. What if you hadn't spoken up? What if you just continued cleaning my office and walked away? I considered his question seriously. Then you would have lost the Yamazaki deal, and both of us would have missed the chance to discover what was possible.
Hey.
But someone else, somewhere else, would have eventually stepped forward. Truth has a way of surfacing when the time is right. By the 3rd year, the foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We'd established partnerships with universities to provide scholarships for working adults, created mentorship programs pairing overlooked employees with industry leaders, and launched a global certification program for companies committed to inclusive talent development. The personal costs, however, were becoming apparent. My marriage to Carlos, while stronger in many ways due to my newfound confidence, was strained by my constant travel and the pressure of public attention. Sophia now graduated and working as an engineer at a renewable energy company. Worried about the toll my schedule was taking on my health. Mom, she said during one of our increasingly rare dinners together, I'm proud of what you've accomplished, but I miss having you as just my mother, not Marcia Rivera, the famous executive. Her words hit harder than any business criticism ever. Had success, I was learning, came with sacrifices that weren't always visible from the outside. It's the same drive that had propelled me from janitor to international executive was now pulling me away from the relationships that mattered most. That night, I called an emergency board meeting with Harrison and the Sakamoto executives. It was time for another transformation. I want to step back from day-to-day operations, I announced. The foundation needs to be bigger than any one person, including me. I want to establish a leadership rotation program, bringing in people from our success stories to run different aspects of the organization. The room was quiet. Finally, Mr. Sakamoto himself, who had flown in from Tokyo, spoke. Marcia-san, you are not retiring from leadership. You are evolving into wisdom. Is the mark of true vision. The transition took a full year to implement properly. Anna became the new director of technology integration, while Miguel took over Latin American operations. Sarah, the former cafeteria worker turned financial analyst, became our new chief financial officer. I remained as chairman of the foundation and senior cultural advisor, roles that allowed me to maintain strategic oversight while stepping back from the exhausting travel schedule. The changes weren't just organizational, they were personal. I started having dinner with Carlos and Sophia at least 3 times a week. I took weekend trips to visit my grandmother's grave, telling her about the foundation that bore her name and the dreams that had finally found their expression across generations and continents. One evening, as I was leaving the office at a reasonable hour for the first time in months, I encountered a young woman mopping the floors in our lobby. She looked up nervously as I approached, clearly expecting to be ignored or criticized for being in the way. Good evening, I said in Spanish, noticing her name tag, Rita Lena. Her eyes widened in surprise, both at being addressed directly and at hearing her native language from someone in an executive suit. Buenas noches, señora, she replied softly. How long have you been working here, Elena? 6 months, señora. Is there a problem? I smiled, remembering my own fear during those early encounters with management. No problem at all. I was just wondering, do you enjoy the work? She hesitated, then spoke with quiet honesty. It pays the bills, señora. I'm studying business administration at night school, but... She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable sharing personal information with someone she assumed was far above her station. "But what?" I encouraged gently. "But sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. People like me, we don't usually get the chance to use degrees like that." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a business card. "Alina, my name is Marcia Rivera. I'd like you to have lunch with me tomorrow. There are some people I'd like you to meet." Lena's story became another foundation success. But more than that, it reminded me why the work mattered. 6 months later, she was working in our Latin American outreach program, using her business education and her lived experience to identify potential in places others overlooked. Her insights had already led to partnerships with 3 new companies and the identification of over a dozen overlooked employees with exceptional potential. But Alina also taught me something I hadn't expected, that my story had become bigger than itself. She told me that custodial workers throughout the city knew about La Mujer que Cambió to-do, the woman who changed everything. My transformation had given hope to people I'd never met in circumstances I'd never imagined. This realization brought both pride and responsibility. During a foundation board meeting, I proposed our most ambitious project yet, a global conference bringing together overlooked workers from around the world to share their stories and their solutions. "We'll call it the Visibility Summit," I explained to the board. "Not a conference about these workers, but a conference by them. Let them be the experts, the keynote speakers, the thought leaders. Let the world see what we've learned, that innovation and insight exist everywhere." The first Visibility Summit took place in Chicago, chosen specifically because it was neither a traditional corporate hub like New York nor a tech center like San Francisco. We wanted to make a statement that important conversations could happen anywhere, led by anyone. Over 3 days, we heard from security guards who had revolutionized building safety, from cafeteria workers who had developed sustainable food programs, from custodians who had created more efficient cleaning processes that saved companies millions while reducing environmental impact. The attendees weren't just workers seeking recognition, they were innovators, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who happened to wear uniforms that made them invisible to most of the business world. The media coverage was unprecedented. More importantly, the event sparked conversations in boardrooms around the world about untapped human potential. 5 years after that night in Harrison's office, I received a call that would test everything I'd built. The caller was from the Nobel Committee, informing me that I'd been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for my work in promoting human dignity and economic equality through the recognition of overlooked talent. The nomination itself was overwhelming, but what struck me most was the nominator. It was a collective submission from over 1,000 workers in 43 countries whose lives had been changed by the Foundation's programs. Their petition read, in part, Marcia Rivera taught the world that peace begins with seeing the humanity in every person regardless of their position or circumstances. I didn't win the Nobel Prize that year. It went to a climate change researcher. His work was equally important, but the nomination accomplished something more valuable than any award could have. It elevated the conversation about workplace dignity to a global level, forcing governments and international organizations to examine their own practices. Regarding worker recognition and advancement, the nomination ceremony in Oslo became another opportunity to highlight our mission. I brought Alina with me, along with Anna, Miguel, and 12 other Foundation success stories. When the international media asked me about the significance of the nomination, I gestured to my colleagues. "The real prize," I said, "isn't the recognition I've received. Standing here with these remarkable individuals who prove that excellence exists everywhere, waiting to be discovered." My grandmother always told me that intelligence without compassion is worthless. Today, I'd add that achievement without sharing is hollow. During our stay in Oslo, I made sure we visited the cleaning staff at our hotel, the security guards at the Nobel Institute, and the maintenance workers at every venue we visited. Conversation revealed the same thing: brilliant, thoughtful, People whose contributions to society extended far beyond their job descriptions. If only someone cared to look. Asterisk. Today, as I write this final chapter, the Akiko Tanaka Foundation operates in 78 countries and has directly impacted the lives of over 10,000 workers. But numbers, impressive as they may be, don't tell the real story. The real story is in the individual moments of recognition. The instant when someone's eyes light up because they realize their knowledge and insights matter. I still work from my office in the Meridian Sakamoto building, though it looks very different. Now, the walls are covered with photographs, letters, and artwork from foundation beneficiaries around the world. There's a drawing from the 6-year-old daughter of a custodian in Manila who wrote, "Thank you for helping my mama become important." There's a business plan from a security guard in Lagos who used his night shift observations to develop an innovative urban safety program that's now being implemented across West Africa. My favorite piece, though, is a simple note card that arrived last week from a cleaning lady in Toronto. It reads, "Mrs. Rivera, I want you to know that when I clean the executive offices now, I don't feel invisible anymore. I feel like I'm preparing the workspace for important people and I know that I'm one of them." This morning, Harrison stopped by my office with news that brought our story full circle. Sakamoto Industries had decided to establish a global policy requiring all subsidiary companies to implement visibility programs based on our model. Every Sakamoto facility worldwide would now have formal processes for identifying and developing overlooked talent among their workforce. "You know what this means?" Harrison asked, his eyes twinkling with the same excitement I'd seen when he realized I could save his company. "It means we're not exceptional anymore," I replied with a smile. "We're becoming normal, and that's exactly what we wanted." As Harrison left, I turned to look out my window at the city below. Somewhere in those buildings, there are people pushing carts, emptying trash cans, and mopping floors while carrying within them the solutions to problems their employers don't even know they have. There are security guards with insights that could revolutionize safety protocols, cafeteria workers with ideas that could transform nutrition programs, and maintenance staff with innovations that could save millions in operational costs. The invisible people are still there, but increasingly they're not staying invisible. The foundation has trained over 5,000 managers and executives in visibility leadership, the art of seeing potential in unexpected places. We've established early identification programs in major corporations, created mentorship networks that span continents, and built a global community of people who refuse to let talent go unrecognized because of job titles or social assumptions. But perhaps our greatest achievement isn't measured in promotions or salary increases or corporate success stories. It's measured in dignity restored in people who go to work each day knowing that they matter, that their contributions are valued, that their potential is recognized. My grandmother's portrait sits on my desk next to a photo of Sophia at her engineering graduation and another of Carlos and me dancing at our 25th wedding anniversary last month. 3 generations of women who believed in the power of patience, preparation, and the perfect moment to step into the light. Sometimes Alina stops by in the evenings, usually when she's working late on a new program or preparing for a presentation to potential partner organizations. She's become one of our most effective advocates, partly because she remembers what it felt like to be invisible, and partly because she embodies the transformation that's possible when someone is truly seen. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked me recently, the simplicity of just cleaning offices and going home. I considered her question carefully. "I miss the certainty," I admitted. "When you're invisible, you know exactly what's expected of you. When you become visible, the expectations expand infinitely. But I wouldn't trade this responsibility for that simplicity. My grandmother didn't cross an ocean and sacrifice her dreams so that I could play it safe." As the sun sets over the city, I prepare to head home to Carlos and our quiet evening routine. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new opportunities to expand our work, new chances to help someone step from shadow into light. But tonight, I'll simply be grateful for the journey that brought me here from invisible janitor to global advocate for human dignity. The story that began with emptying trash cans in executive offices has become something larger than I ever imagined. It's become a movement, a philosophy. It's a reminder that in a world obsessed with credentials and titles, the most valuable resources are often hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to really see them. My name is Marcia Rivera. I am the granddaughter of an engineer, the daughter of dreamers, the mother of an innovator, and the founder of a foundation that believes every person carries within them the seeds of greatness. I am no longer invisible, and I've dedicated my life to ensuring that others don't have to remain in the shadows either. The invisible people of the world are still there. In every building, on every shift, in every industry. But they're not staying invisible. And that, perhaps, is the most revolutionary change of all. The story continues, written now by thousands of hands, spoken in hundreds of languages. Lived in the daily experiences of people who refuse to be overlooked any longer. The invisible janitor has become a visible reminder that greatness comes in many forms. And that the most important discoveries often happen when we finally learn to see what was there all along. 7 years after that transformative night, I found myself facing an unexpected crisis that would test everything the foundation had built. It started with a phone call at 3 a.m. from Harrison, his voice tight with concern. "Marcia, we have a problem. Channel 7 is running an expose tomorrow morning. They're calling our success stories fabricated, claiming the foundation is an elaborate corporate PR scheme." I sat up in bed, Carlos stirring beside me as I reached for my robe. "What's their evidence?" "A former employee, someone we let go last year for falsifying reports, has gone to the media claiming we coached people on fake backgrounds and staged their discoveries. They're specifically targeting Elena's story, saying no security guard could have really developed those insights about building efficiency." The irony was bitter. In our success, we'd become so effective at finding hidden talent that people couldn't believe it was real. The very impossibility that had once made us invisible was now being used to discredit our visibility by morning. The story had exploded across social media. #FigJanitor was trending, with critics claiming that no cleaning person could possibly speak multiple languages or understand complex technical documents. The accusations cut deep because they revealed the same prejudices we'd been fighting all along, the assumption that working-class people couldn't possess extraordinary abilities. I called an emergency meeting with our leadership team, which now included 12 former invisible employees who had risen to executive positions within the foundation and its partner organizations. "They're attacking our credibility," Miguel said, his face grim as he scrolled through the negative coverage. "But more than that, they're attacking the credibility of everyone we've helped. This isn't just about us. It's about whether society believes that intelligence and talent can exist outside traditional pathways." Anna, our former security guard turned technology director, looked up from her laptop. "The comment sections are brutal. People are saying that if we were really talented, we would have been discovered earlier. They can't accept that the system failed us. They'd rather believe we're frauds." The foundation's response had to be swift and strategic. I knew that traditional corporate crisis management wouldn't work here. This was fundamentally about human dignity and societal assumptions. We needed to respond not with lawyers and PR firms, but with truth and transparency. "We're going to do something unprecedented," I announced to the team. "We're going to open our books completely. Every program, every success story, every piece of documentation. We'll create a public database where anyone can verify our claims, contact our beneficiaries directly, and examine our methods." Alina, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. "Marcia, they're questioning my engineering knowledge specifically. They're saying it's impossible for someone who worked nights as security to understand building systems well enough to propose improvements." She paused, then straightened her shoulders with a determination I recognized from my own journey. I want to challenge the lead reporter to a public debate. Let him bring his experts, and I'll bring my knowledge. We'll see who really understands building efficiency systems. The debate was scheduled for the following week on primetime television. Alina spent hours preparing, not just reviewing her technical knowledge, but also gathering documentation of her educational background and the specific observations that had led to her insights. What the critics hadn't bothered to investigate was that Alina held a degree in industrial engineering from Mexico credentials that had been dismissed by American employers because they weren't from a recognized institution. The night before the debate, Alina came to my office, visibly nervous. What if I can't explain it well enough? What if I prove their point instead of ours? I thought of my grandmother, of the courage it had taken to speak Japanese in Harrison's office that night years ago. Lena, you're not just representing yourself tomorrow. You're representing every person who has ever been underestimated because of their job title or their accent or their circumstances. Trust in what you know and remember that truth has its own power. Asterisk, the debate was watched by over 12 million people, becoming one of the most viewed segments in the network's history. Alina faced off against Dr. Richard Thornton, a building efficiency expert with multiple degrees and decades of consulting experience, who had publicly stated that her proposals were mathematically impossible. What followed was 90 minutes of Alina systematically dismantling every one of Dr. Thornton's assumptions, while explaining not just the theory behind her innovations, but the practical observations that had led to them. Dr. Thornton, Alina, said during a particularly compelling exchange, "Your models assume perfect conditions that don't exist in real buildings. I've spent thousands of hours walking through actual facilities, observing how airflow patterns change based on human behavior, how energy usage fluctuates depending on cleaning schedules, how security rounds can be optimized to also serve as efficiency monitoring. You've studied buildings as static systems. I've lived in them as dynamic environments." By the end of the debate, Dr. Thornton himself acknowledged that Alina's approach offered insights his academic training had missed. The Twitter hashtag changed from hashtag fake janitor to hashtag real expertise. And Alina's proposals were subsequently implemented in over 200 buildings across North America. But the real victory came in the weeks following, as other overlooked workers began speaking up about their own expertise. A cafeteria worker in Denver published a paper on nutritional psychology that revolutionized hospital meal programs. A maintenance supervisor in Atlanta developed a predictive repair algorithm that saved his company $3 million annually. The controversy had inadvertently created a platform for exactly the kind of recognition we'd been working toward. The foundation received over 5,000 new applications in the month following Alina's debate. But more importantly, we received inquiries from Fortune 500 companies wanting to implement formal talent identification programs based on our model. You know, Harrison told me as we reviewed the applications, they tried to destroy us and ended up proving our point better than we ever could have. My grandmother used to say that truth is like water, I replied. It always finds a way to the surface, no matter how many obstacles you put in its path. The controversy's unexpected benefit was that it forced us to systematize our approach more rigorously. We developed standardized assessment tools, created verification protocols, and established partnerships with universities to validate the credentials and innovations of our beneficiaries. What had started as an organic recognition of hidden talent became a replicable methodology that other organizations could adopt. Dr. Thornton, surprisingly, became one of our most effective advocates after his public acknowledgement of Alina's expertise. He joined our advisory board and helped develop the academic frameworks that gave credibility to our empirical observations. His conversion from critic to supporter became a powerful symbol of how open-minded engagement could bridge the gap between traditional expertise and practical innovation, the Foundation's 10th Anniversary Gala was held in the same ballroom where Meridian Industries had once celebrated its corporate milestones. But instead of executives in expensive suits, the stage was filled with former custodians, security guards, food service workers, and maintenance staff who now held positions as department heads, consultants, researchers, and entrepreneurs. Sophia, now a successful renewable energy engineer and mother of my first grandchild, introduced me as the evening's keynote speaker. My mother taught me that intelligence isn't inherited dates. Recognized, she said to the audience of over 1,000 people. Tonight, we celebrate not just individual success stories, but a fundamental shift in how society defines and discovers talent. As I stood at the podium, looking out at faces that represented every continent and dozens of languages, I felt my grandmother's presence more strongly than ever. Her dreams had not only survived immigration, discrimination, and decades of invisibility, they had multiplied and spread around the world. 10 years ago, I was emptying trash cans in a corporate office, convinced that my knowledge and abilities would never matter to anyone beyond my family. Tonight, I stand before leaders, innovators, and changemakers who prove that potential isn't limited by circumstances, only limited by recognition. I paused, seeing Alina in the front row, her own success having inspired dozens of other security guards to pursue advanced degrees in leadership positions. But our work is far from finished. For every success story in this room, there are thousands of people still waiting to be seen, still believing that their insights don't matter because of the uniform they wear or the shift they work. Our mission isn't complete until invisibility becomes impossible. The Foundation's global expansion accelerated after the Anniversary Gala, with new programs launching in Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Eastern Europe. Each region brought unique challenges and opportunities, requiring culturally adapted approaches while maintaining our core principles of recognition and dignity. In Vietnam, we discovered that factory workers had developed sophisticated quality control innovations that surpassed formal industrial engineering standards. In Kenya, security guards had created community safety programs that reduced crime rates more effectively than traditional policing methods. In Poland, cleaning staff had identified inefficiencies in hospital protocols that improved patient outcomes while reducing costs. But perhaps our most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source: artificial intelligence. Anna, our former security guard turned technology director, had been working with a team of programmers to develop an AI system that could identify patterns in employee suggestions and innovations that might otherwise be overlooked by management. The AI doesn't see job titles or educational backgrounds, Anna explained to our board of directors during a quarterly meeting. It only analyzes the quality and potential impact of ideas. We're finding that some of our most valuable insights are coming from people that traditional talent identification systems would never flag. The AI system, which we called Vista Visibility Intelligence for Strategic Talent Assessment, was piloted in 50 companies across 10 countries. The results were remarkable: a 340% increase in implemented employee suggestions, a 67% improvement in operational efficiency metrics, and an 89% increase in employee satisfaction scores related to feeling valued and heard. More importantly, Vista was identifying talent in ways that even our trained human assessors had missed. The system was colorblind to hierarchy, immune to unconscious bias, and focused solely on the substance of contributions rather than their source. Microsoft, Google, and Amazon all approached us about licensing the technology. But after lengthy discussions with our board, we decided to open source the system instead. Our goal had never been profit, had been transformation, making Vista freely available to any organization meant that our impact could scale exponentially without requiring our direct involvement. We're not just changing how individual companies operate. I told the press conference announcing the open source release. We're changing the fundamental assumptions about how human potential is distributed and discovered. This technology proves that innovation exists everywhere. We just needed better tools to see it. Today, 12 years after that night in Harrison's office, I sit in my study at home preparing for what may be my final public appearance as the Foundation's active chairman. Tomorrow, I will announce my transition to emeritus status, passing operational leadership to Alina, who has become not just a success story, but a visionary leader in her own right. The numbers tell part of our story. The Akiko Tanaka Foundation now operates in 94 countries, has directly impacted over 50,000 workers, and has influenced policy changes that affect millions more. Vista has been implemented by over 3,000 organizations worldwide. And our visibility leadership training has been completed by more than 100,000 managers and executives. But statistics, as impressive as they may be, can't capture the true measure of what we've accomplished. The real victory is in the cultural shift we've helped create, the growing recognition that talent, innovation, and wisdom aren't the exclusive domain of the traditionally educated or conventionally successful. Yesterday, I received a letter from a young woman in Bangladesh whose mother, a textile factory worker, used insights from our program to redesign production workflows that increased efficiency by 30% while reducing worker fatigue. The daughter is now studying industrial engineering at university, funded by a scholarship from the foundation, with plans to return to her community and continue her mother's innovative work. This morning, Carlos and I took our 3-year-old granddaughter Akiko, named for my grandmother, to visit the memorial garden we established at the foundation headquarters. As she played among the flowers, each variety representing a different country where we operate, I told her the same stories my grandmother had told me about the power of patience, preparation, and recognizing the perfect moment to step forward. Abuela, little Akiko asked in her mix of English and Spanish, "Why do some people think janitors aren't smart?" The question, asked with the innocent directness of childhood, crystallized everything we've been working toward. I knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that sparkled with the same curiosity that had driven my grandmother across an ocean and through decades of quiet determination. Some people think that being smart means having certain jobs or going to certain schools, I explained. But you and I know better. Being smart means paying attention, asking good questions, and caring about making things better for everyone. And that can happen anywhere, wearing any kind of uniform. She nodded solemnly, then brightened. Like how you were the smartest janitor ever? I laughed, remembering my own journey from invisibility to recognition. I was never just a janitor, Mia. I was always an engineer, a linguist, a problem solver, and a bridge builder. It just took the world a while to see what was already there. As we walked home through the city streets, I noticed something that would have been impossible 12 years ago: a group of office building maintenance workers taking a break. And instead of being ignored by the business people hurrying past, several stopped to chat, to ask questions, to engage with them as fellow human beings rather than invisible fixtures. The revolution we started wasn't loud or violent or sudden. It was quiet, persistent, and built on the simple recognition that every person carrying a mop or pushing a cart or checking security monitors might also be carrying the solution to problems we don't even know we have. It was built on my grandmother's belief that intelligence without compassion is worthless, and my own discovery that potential without recognition is tragedy tomorrow. Alina will take over as chairman of the foundation, bringing with her not just the passion of someone who remembers being invisible, but the vision of someone who understands that our work is just beginning. There are still millions of people around the world whose talents remain hidden behind assumptions about class, education, and social status. But tonight, as I prepare for this transition, I'm filled with hope rather than concern. The foundation we built was never about any one person. It was about creating a movement that could sustain itself through the dedication of people who refuse to let human potential go. Unrecognized. The invisible janitor has become a visible reminder that greatness comes in many forms, and that the most important discoveries often happen when we finally learn to see what was there all along. But more than that, it's become proof that one person's courage to step into the light can illuminate the path for countless others. My name is Marcia Rivera. I am the granddaughter of an engineer who never stopped dreaming, the daughter of immigrants who never stopped believing, the mother of an innovator who never stopped growing, and the grandmother of a child who will grow up in a world where being invisible is no longer the default setting for the overlooked and underestimated. The story that began with emptying trash cans has become a legacy of emptying the world to see potential where it least expects to find it, and proving that the most profound transformations often start with the simplest act of recognition. The revolution continues. One person at a time, one moment of visibility at a time, one recognition at a time that we are all more than our job descriptions suggest, and that human dignity demands nothing less than seeing and honoring the full depth of what each person brings to the world. The invisible are becoming visible. The overlooked are being seen. And the janitor who once cleaned up after other people's decisions is now part of a global movement. That's cleaning up the way society recognizes and develops human potential. This is where the story truly begins.